All right, let's hop into. You mentioned resource planning and analysis, so let's talk about that. What's the output and what's the goal of resource planning and analysis, and walk us through that process where you can kind of give us a vision into how you think about going about the process of resource planning and what the purpose of it is, and what the best case scenario is with your output.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm assuming the question is specifically for the sales function and building out the go-to-market plan from a sales capacity perspective.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So resource plan is always a pretty tough one, especially when you don't have a lot of data to go off of. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about building a financial plan for the next year when you've had like 3 years under your belt, it's a lot easier to straight line.
Yep.
But
maybe we should do some examples. At LinkedIn, what would that process look like? And then at Zenefits differently, what would that process look like?
Yeah. So at LinkedIn, I was fortunate enough to be learning from a ton of really experienced folks and getting to kind of take what they've built and build on that. Where in Zenefits we were doing everything from scratch, and the straight line was kind of insane. It wasn't a straight line; it was a exponential curve. Where when I joined Zenefits the year prior, it was like under 2 million revenue. And the year I joined, we did 10 million, and the plan for the next year was 100 million. So it was just absolute bananas growth. So we were operating with very little data and, kind of almost with a gun to the head, like how much can we do if we really squeeze as much juice out of the lemon as possible. So, that planning process was, best way to describe it was we would take all the different sales channels that we see that would provide fruit throughout that year. So, the key ones I would really zero in on are inbound leads, how much we're getting from marketing, from both word of mouth, our SEM spend, basically all the contact us leads we get from the website, chat leads we get from the website, put them into one bucket. Second would be events, so webinars, trade shows, in-person events, those kind of things. That would be our events bucket, and then content. So we generate white papers, data sheets. We try to circulate them on every avenue that we could, and that would make up our request content bucket. And those are kind of the key. Or actually, one more I would call out is email. So cold marketing emails would be the fourth bucket. That was a really important one at Zenefits, especially because we had one of the most ingenious email marketers probably on the planet at the helm of the ship at that point. So we took those 4 different channels and figured out, okay, how much can we squeeze out of those channels? How many leads given the size of the market? So we did a total addressable market sizing exercise and understood that, okay, there's 8 million small businesses in the US that fit our demographic. How many do we think we can actually go get, and how many are within the general confines of what makes sense for our target demographic? Meaning, we wouldn't consider businesses that don't have email addresses, or basically things like that wouldn't make them a good candidate for a technology solution.
Right.
And that was basically our addressable market, and we figured, okay, let's say we can get there in the next 10 years. So we would take all the different sales channels that we have based on the conversion rates that we knew we can get from those channels, and basically looked at both the cost and the resources that were needed against each channel to generate those leads, and that would be kind of in the cost section of the analysis. And on the capacity side, we would figure out, okay, how many, for example, sales development reps would we need to qualify 100 leads? And based on the conversion rates that we knew across each channel, how many of those leads would turn into wins? And so we would take that analysis of total leads by channel, and have kind of there's a lot of like art versus science and stuff. So it's not always going to be an equation where the left side equals the right. So we would take total amount of leads that we generate by channel, and figure out, okay, how many sales development reps do we need to generate those leads, or even qualify those leads, and then how many account executives do we need to be on the other side to handle those leads. And what we would do to calculate the amount of account executives which I think was one of the biggest faults to our original model, was assuming that, okay, how many hours does an account executive have in a day to do these, to qualify these leads? And we think about, okay, well, it's not just new leads they're qualifying, but how many, how much of their day are they going to spend on the second touch, third touch, fourth touch of their current pipeline?
Yep.
And so we, generally in that equation, a lot of companies will underestimate the time it takes to actually follow up with the sales cycle.
Right.
And just assume that, okay, you probably should you should probably spend most of your time on new leads versus following up with old pipeline, which is absolutely the wrong way to do it. So a good way to think about it is, okay, 30 of your time should be spent on new leads. 2/3 should be spent on following up with the existing pipeline. That's obviously a very peanut butter spread metric. And based on whatever that time spent allocation ratio is, you can figure out, okay, how many new leads can an account executive actually handle based on sales cycles and everything else. So taking that equation, you can figure out, okay, this is how many leads can go through the system. This is how much capacity an HA can take, and this is how many sales reps we're going to need to support them. And then you kind of play with both the inputs, mostly the inputs, to figure out, okay, where at what point do we hit a breaking point in the system where either you get diminishing returns by generating more lead, it costs you more money than it does to actually generate those leads, that it does to put numbers on the scoreboard,